And we're live, coming to you through virtually connecting from all over and connecting with the ECampusOntario Fellows at TESS 18 in Toronto. I'm Joe Murphy. I'm the director of the Center for Innovative Pedagogy at Kenyon College and a member of Virtually Connecting. And could we get our other virtual guests to introduce yourselves? Julia?
Sure. I'm Julia Burke. I'm an instructional design consultant. I'm working with Ryerson University and have worked with a variety of Ontario colleges and universities.
Terrific. Luke?
Luc Bussière from Hearst University. I'm actually president of Hearst University. I was a professor of sociology a year ago, but now I have other tasks.
Wonderful. Welcome. Thank you for making time. Rosemary, you want to say hi?
I teach for a variety of Ontario colleges and universities. I've taught for years through Ryerson, George Brown, community colleges, Sheridan Centennial College, and I helped George Brown launch 2 new programs back in the 90s. Sport marketing program and the international trade program, both of which still exist today. They're postgraduate programs.
Terrific. Tracy, you just joined us. We're doing introductions. If you'd like me to do the on-site folks and then you can jump in, that's fine, or you're welcome to introduce yourself now.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I'm Tracy Mullins. I work for an organization called Alpha Plus, which is we support adult literacy programs in Ontario. Oh,
you're good.
Sorry, I just got an error message, but I guess it's not. Okay. So yeah, we support. What did I say? We support LBS literacy and basic skills programs in Ontario, mostly around the use of digital technology, and we're working with eCampus to sort of open up the open education resources to that field as well. Some of the people we work with work in colleges, but not all of the programs are in colleges. Some of them are in school boards or community-based organizations.
Cool. And folks on site, would you introduce yourselves?
Sorry, maybe Maureen, you want to go first?
Hi, I'm Maureen Glenn. I'm a senior e-learning designer at Trent University and Open Education Fellow with ECampusOntario.
My name's Aaron Langell. I'm a master lecturer at Laurentian University. I'm a Laurentian University Teaching Fellow and an ECampusOntario Open Education Fellow.
Hi, I'm Laura Killam. I sing at Cambrian College, and I also work as the innovation champion in their hub, which is basically a faculty support area. And I'm happy to be a fellow with eCampus as well.
I'm James Skidmore. I'm an eCampus fellow, obviously, and I'm a prof for German studies at the University of Waterloo.
Helen, you want to just
Helen? Oh, there's Helen.
And I'll pop in. I'm Helen DeWard. I'm an OE fellow with eCampusOntario, and I'm the virtually connecting back channel chatter person.
And I'm Jenny Heyman. I'm on the on-site buddy. I work for eCampusOntario as a program manager, and one of the programs that I get to work with is the OE Fellows program, which is a real privilege. So maybe we'll just go around a little bit. Maureen, maybe you want to start and tell us something about
just a bit about how I got.
Yeah, how you're a fellow and anything about yesterday's session, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. So I've worked as an instructional designer with the university in a university context for 8 or 9 years, and over time I found my research and my interests were leaning in the direction of open, and I also realized in my work as an instructional designer that I was constantly having conversations with faculty who were already in situations where they were rethinking how they were teaching and just teaching and learning in the context of their courses. And I realized it's a very short path from conversations about instructional design in general to conversations about open. And that's sort of how I engaged in more meaningful involvement in open. And when the opportunity to become an OE fellow came around, I thought about some research and how I might like to contribute through this program with eCampus Ontario. So my focus is looking at open OER, open practice in the context of online course development. And so yesterday was a day where we came together to really connect with people who are interested and probably already doing work on their campuses and wanting to do more. So as fellows, we were able to bring some stories with us about the work that we've been doing and facilitate some conversations around how we can all work together to move open forward in colleges and universities in Ontario. And we had some great conversations, which I'm sure we'll talk more about shortly.
Yeah, great.
Okay, I've been a master lecturer at Laurentian in the computer science department for the last 10 or so years. And as a master lecturer, I'm teaching stream prof. So I've had quite a number of courses over the last 10 years and a lot of time to spend reflecting on my own teaching practices. I was part of the move to make our computer science facilities free for students so that all the software needs would be open and freely available. So that's probably the closest thing I bring to the position as an OE fellow from the start. I'm kind of the rookie in terms of open education, but I think working with the open software was definitely helpful. And now I'm looking to take some of those techniques and apply them to pedagogy and to other things that are available inside the classroom. So that's sort of what I'm trying to leverage is how do we do that, and how do we bring that from a handful of classes on campus to a more institutional style buy-in. So that's where I'm focusing, because Laurentian doesn't have a lot of that yet. But like a lot of institutions, so from our conversations yesterday, a lot of institutions are starting to have both grassroots and sort of top-down interest in open. And while it's relatively small right now, most institutions will say that it's growing, that the interest is growing, that the applications are growing, and that we need to keep pushing it forward. So we talked about a lot of techniques to do that.
Kind of like Aaron, I identified as a bit of a newbie when I started the fellowship program to open education, but it was something that I found I was doing anyways in my everyday practice. I'm the kind of person who would share all the stuff that I created, whether it be online or in person with people. Yesterday, what kind of struck me from our conversations was the wide variety of things that people find are within their ability to do to advocate for open, whether it be at a small or a large level. Every institution has its own context, but I put out a blog last night about the summary of our discussion last night, and so that's on Twitter. I don't know if you guys are on Twitter, but basically they were talking about, you know, even just adopting something or helping other people who are looking to adopt things, sharing the things that they find, or even just engaging on social media is sort of some small individual things that you could do in your own practice to make a difference. But then when you look more at the advocacy side, a lot of it came down to a lot of one-on-one discussion with people and talking to them about how some of the things that they're already doing are very much in line with open, so that you kind of, I think a lot of us kind of realize that maybe we're already doing some of these things without realizing it. And then there's a lot of power that comes from when you find your people. And that's kind of what people spoke about. So we've sort of found some of our people from across different institutions, which I think is a really powerful part of being a fellow. But you can find your people in the hallways of your own campuses. And then when you find those people, you'll find people that you can identify as champions. And those are the people whose work that you can amplify, because they're the people who are going to be sort of out front and showcasing some of those things. And then there's some talk about other ways to do stuff like connecting with students and crashing needs. There's just quite a wide variety of strategies that are actually very actionable for people to do when they return from a conference like this.
That's a neat reflection. Lauren, can you give us your blog URL just so that folks can find that?
It's insights.nursekillam.com, and I think Helen will put it
in Twitter and
in chat.
I tweeted it out last night if you want to copy and paste it into the chat.
Great.
Actually, I don't have access to that.
Oh, okay.
In.
All right. Sorry, I'm going to put it in the chat. What is it again, Laura?
Insights.
Yeah.
.nursekillam.
Yep.
.com, and it'll be the latest blog that's up there.
Great. All right, I'm going to move over to James.
Yep. Hi, everyone. So like the others, we had, well, first of all, my interest in open education is in my field, German studies. It's not very well represented, and the kind of teaching that we do in the humanities involves a lot of curation. So I'm very interested in that aspect of open in my own practice, if you will. But with yesterday's event with the OEO Summit, I was especially struck by the energy in the room. People are really keen on pursuing open activities, open educational practices in various manners and forms, which is wonderful to see all the different ideas. And one of the things I'm doing as a fellow with ECampusOntario is trying to focus a bit on the policy issues. And so we had these sessions at the end of the day where we managed stations where different topics were discussed. And boy, people are interested in policy, which is surprising to me because it's so boring. But it's essential, and there's a real desire for as much as people are enthusiastic about the bottom-up approach. There's a feeling that we're hitting a ceiling in that regard, and we need more top-down support. And the difficulty there is, of course, then how do you maneuver administrations and campuses in that direction to provide more of that top-down guidance, top-down support, top-down facilitation of open practices. So that's going to be a long-term activity, a long-term project, but I think it's essential that we tackle it. And I think one of the great things about having an association or a consortium like ECampusOntario is that we have a framework in the province with which we can do that. And I think that's going to be essential.
Helen, do you want to tell some of your story? I can turn around. Very good.
And for me, the session that I ran yesterday was all about finding the stars, the people in your constellation that you can attach to in the open. And it's surprising how many names came out from each of the groups. And each group, I hid the sheet from the previous group so that they wouldn't see. And now I'm going to collate them and present them back to the group that was there yesterday. And it's interesting to see how often virtually connecting came out in the conversation. So I was really happy. I did not prompt that, but it did. And nice to see Maha's name coming through as well.
All right, Joe, well, maybe I'll turn it over to see if there are questions from virtual participants or anyone that wants to introduce themselves that we haven't heard from.
That would be great. And yes, I'd love to have Paula and Greg say hello real quick, if you don't mind a quick introduction.
Hi, everybody. I'm Greg McVeary. Sorry I was a few minutes late. We were doing some running records work. I'm actually here with all of my students in one of my literacy classes at Southern Connecticut State University. So they're watching, and I've been talking to them a little about what it means to be networked and openly. As a network scholar, everybody in the class has their own website and blog, and we have a class feed that kind of sucks it all in. And we talk about phonemics and phonics, basically using the oldest kind of technologies, using the newest kind of technologies to talk about our oldest writing technologies, basically. So we're having fun.
Well, that's great. And let me, I'll extend the invitation that I'm going to assume is okay with you, that if you've got students with questions, I hope they'll come up and join us as well.
Yep, I'll have them walk up and they can ask.
Paula, hi.
Hi, Paula Reeves. I'm faculty at George Brown College in Toronto, and I'm here because I am trying to foster community. I have been promoting technology within my department for the last, 6-7 years for engagement and for helping teachers with their learning. And so I'm just here to sort of figure out, is there something else I could be doing? Capture some energy from other people who are doing something similar.
Well, that's wonderful. So folks, do we have some questions? This is supposed to be a conversation, so I'd love for you to say if you've got things that you're interested in or reacting to. Rebecca, you're muted. Or Rosemary, I'm sorry, Rosemary. turn your mic on.
There, is that all right? Can you hear me?
There
All
you
right.
are.
Okay. I thought you had to turn it on. I discovered I had to turn it on.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot about open education, but I must admit that I don't know a lot about how it's structured or how it came to be or how it's formatted. Could you give us a brief thumbnail sketch on that topic?
Jenny.
Dr. Jenny.
Doctor.
Yeah, they just gave me a doctorate recently, so open, so I'll give it a shot. So, open education takes a lot of different forms. It can take the form of building and offering a course that has no tuition and has no password, that people can simply take and use the knowledge. So that's open education kind of in a big way. A lot of what we talk about in open education are open educational resources. And these are things like open textbooks, open courseware, and these have been created by people. Sometimes they're paid, sometimes they're doing it out of goodwill. But there's a strong movement to share these teaching and learning resources for the good of the commons, so that knowledge can be shared as much as we can globally and openly. And there's a series of licenses that go along with these open ones, very common ones that are called Creative Commons licenses. So if you are interested in creating open materials or finding open materials, there's a lot of good resources. And I can and will share out a couple of links before we go of places to look for open educational resources in your discipline or for your school or a program you're coordinating. And across the spectrum of post-secondary disciplines, there are a lot of resources and more being added every day, these open resources and open textbooks. So that's pretty much the content side, the open education side. And then we start to talk about open educational practices, which are learner-centered creation. And there's a huge variety of open practices.
Even just transparency in what you're doing.
Yeah. So do any of you want to kind of add to that idea of
just
what is
talking
open
about
education?
Open practices. A lot of people are talking about rather than developing content behind opaque walls, making sure that that's open. So releasing versions of slides so that people can see what's changed. Talking about your practices online and with your personal learning networks, making sure that your students are involved in syllabus creation and content creation and things like that. So sort of tearing down all the walls we possibly can is my sense of what open is. So whether those walls are financial or bureaucratic or simply things that we used to do in private that we're now doing sort of in a more public manner, that's my idea of what open is.
Anybody else? All right, that's kind of the basics. I hope that's helpful.
For me, I look at it kind of just learning out loud, like trying to build that like reflective feedback loops. And what's interesting is when we study these open learning communities, in a sense, half of the journey is just getting yourself in the open. Like there's so much learning that happens by just, and we've all, Gardner used to always call that, your digital cyber infrastructure. We use words like cyber back in 1998, but that act of building like the kind of the art of the self in the open. I really want to study that because it's not just about like the OER and it's not just about, taking down barriers, but there's a vulnerability to the openness too of just, to me, it's just learning out loud. And I love it. It's a lot of fun, but I feel like I worry that I'm forcing my worldview on my students. I'm like, okay, now here's your website. Now you have to go be a public, person. We do talk about ways to control privacy and how actually you have more privacy in open learning. Like they're not, open and privacy aren't different things. And so I'll stop there. I'm babbling now.
It's a good one though.
That's good babble.
Yeah.
I think particularly as we talk about open practices, choice is a really important component of that. And I think it's one of the areas where this community can have some tension that I just ran a summer workshop with some other folks at Autumn Keynes and some, the curriculum designed by Sunday Richard, who are folks that some of us know. And one of the things that was important in working with faculty is to say, this is about you exploring and choosing. And at the end of the day, if you say Twitter is not for me, but I might like to blog, I might even like to own my own domain, or maybe I do want to do all of these things, that's part of your self-construction. I think that could be a really interesting area of research.
And I think it's good to give students the choice too. So I this past semester gave my students the choice of doing the blog thing like you were talking about earlier, but also modeling Jenny's MOOC, which I had taken on open education earlier. I offered them the option of participating in different sort of ways. So she allowed us to do it wherever we wanted. And I thought that that was a really interesting approach to take. Still need to figure out the best way to work that out logistically though. Like just in terms of tracking it all, but I think we can give students the choice.
Other questions?
I had a question. I was hoping you could speak a little bit more to how OERs are changing how we're approaching assessments and activities, especially in the context of online learning. So in the form of moving away from disposable assignments, as more institutions, more colleges, more universities, industry getting on board with OER, what kind of innovations are we seeing from the activity and assessment perspective?
Helen, do you want to, I know you do a lot of open activities and assessments. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
For me, the assessments are, they're done openly. They're blogging, they're doing posting to YouTube, they're creating tweets. They're self-assessing more, and they're doing peer assessment more. So in one course, I have students providing comments on each other's blogs, and now part of their assignment is to comment on one of my blog posts. I blog frequently, and then the next step for them is to comment to somebody else's blog site that they don't know. So it's these layers and structures of kind of strategic support for them to become more familiar with working in the open. So that's part of the assignment structure I use. I know Laura might be able to talk a little bit about what she's been trying.
So this year we co-constructed rubrics for several assignments in the class that I did. So in the past, I would come to students and I'd say, here's a rubric. What do you think we should change about it? Instead, this semester, it took several weeks, but I came to the class. I said, okay, these are the assignments. What do you think they should look like? What forms should they take? What are the criteria? And I found I had to do a lot of coaching in terms of what the exemplary column of the rubric would look like. But through the process of actually building the rubric, the expectations of the assignments became a lot clearer. And then we had a conversation around what license we should put. And in consultation with the students who actively contributed, we put that out as a CC BY licensed rubric. And so next year we could maybe build on that. Very similar to Helen, I did the blogging thing, except that I didn't force students to approve my comments. I don't know if you did the same thing, but I would go and I would blog, I would comment on their blog, but at the top I would say, feel free not to approve this comment for public viewing, therefore giving them the choice whether or not they wanted that to be seen. And I found it a very good experience for clarifying. And I don't know if anybody's going to use the rubrics that they made, but in my reflection on comparing to previous rubrics, I found that those rubrics were much better than ones that I had created in isolation. And so I'm hoping to use them and use that approach in an ongoing way.
That's a good revelation. Does anyone, or Aaron or James, are you doing, or Maureen, are you doing anything project-based or portfolio-based?
Not yet.
My students do a project in this one course where they have to create a story map of Berlin or Vienna. And so in that course, because Story Maps is it's a free service by Esri and ArcGIS, and one of the requirements is that then what you produce is then publicly available. And so the students do that, and so now over the next 6 weeks they'll be creating a story map related to particular points of interest in those cities, and where they will try to tell either a story or a bit of the history of those cities. And they've been learning how to bring in all sorts of other kinds of information into that, photos, videos, that kind of thing, and learning about how to cite that properly in a kind of an open or public web context, and getting them to think about those kinds of things. And that's then that all of that has replaced any kind of final exam or any kind of final essay. And so I'm hopeful that that'll be a good project for them. It's tricky because they're not geography students, and they're not. It's the first time they've worked with things like maps, really. So it's for some of them it's intimidating. But my hope is that through this they get a whole different understanding of how to approach knowledge about a city, for example.
Great, cool. All right, we just have a couple minutes left. Are there any final questions for the fellows?
So I've got kind of a big one because what you're saying about the top up and bottom down approaches is very resonant with me, and I'm curious about the comment that you're feeling like you might be hitting a ceiling of what's possible, and I'd love to hear a little more, if you don't mind, about that turn.
I'll just tell you briefly what some people said in our discussions yesterday in a webinar we held last week, which I think Jenny can give the URL as well too. In the sense that people are doing lots of things on their campuses, but connecting with other people, talking to the right people, trying to make things happen. And yet there are some obstacles in place that they can't get past. In Ontario, for example, in the colleges, more so than at the universities, in the colleges, the questions surrounding intellectual property rights and who owns the teaching materials that are created is problematic at the college level because of certain wording.
Yeah. So if you guys make a lesson plan,
and so we have that's just one example of an issue, and so you can only do so much from the bottom up with regard to dealing with that kind of an issue, and so we need to find ways to start doing top down to remove some of these obstacles.
It's interesting, and I've been reading up a lot on Ursula Franklin, and she's quite the critic of technology. But she had this idea of prescriptive and holistic technologies. And I've been studying the Indie Web Learning Community and DS106, both two very open learning communities. But we came to this conclusion, Indie Web went very top down, where they said, nope, you have to have these set of technical skills. If you don't have them, they put in huge barriers, where DS106 started at the bottom. You have no tech skills. They had the same goal, get people online. But one wanted to do from the super top down approach, and the other one tried to do from, only holistic technologies. And then DS106 took like more prescriptive, meaning technologies where you don't control the design. You have to design within the parameters of WordPress.com, for example. And introducing people to holistic practices more than prescriptive technologies. And so I think that what the piece that I think works best, it's not about whether it's top down or bottom up. It's more those scaffolds as teachers and educators that all of us put in place. I worry with the comments. I tell my students all the same things. Like, oh yeah, you don't have to approve your comments. You can make a post private. But if you don't really know the system, and because it defaults to open, am I making them more open? Am I forcing them to be open because they don't know how to make things private? So that's kind of one of the concerns I have with that kind of the top-down, bottom-up approach. And when I let them choose between all the blogging platforms, it got too hard for me to support them all. So I ended up just picking one because I couldn't support 5 myself. Like I couldn't make 5 different video tutorials. I just had to make one tutorial.
Yeah, and I would say, just a lot of people are looking at a both and scenario. So both, supporting through community, through social networking, those who are working at the grassroots level, and then finding ways to advocate to senior administrators in colleges and universities for better policies, for more open opportunities and choices for educators, especially where colleges are not actually doing anything with the content they claim to own.
Yeah. Sorry.
Is there time for one more quick question?
Yeah.
Are we wrapped up? Maybe?
Basket.
Okay. The question is about student privacy issues. So as we are, we see the value of open education, we want to bring open education to our classroom, but how do we navigate those conversations? How do we give students the choice? What avenues or best practices are there to help navigate the issue of student privacy in terms of the academic materials they're producing?
Can I sneak in on that?
Yeah, sure, Aaron.
I'm gonna sneak in. As a computer science prof, I do a lot of work with social media myself. I would not tend to ask. So unlike some of my colleagues on the panel here, I don't necessarily believe in having students post to YouTube or social media or blogging and stuff like that. And to me, open doesn't have to mean exposed. Like I can still make all of my practices open, and I can still give them content choices and consumable content that they can retrieve. So I can meet my goals of being an open educator without having to expose them to anything like that. There are a lot of instances where people are asking the students to themselves be open, but I don't necessarily see them having to go together. I don't have to have them be open to be an open educator myself. I can make all of my processes, all of my content be freely modifiably available without having to have them worry about their privacy. So I mean, a lot of people are giving examples where students are out in the open, and I think what you simply need to do is make the students aware that their stuff is going to be publicly available. So they should choose their words very carefully, choose their formats very carefully. And then you should, in my opinion, also give students an opt-out if they're not comfortable with that. We have no idea what's going on in students' personal lives, and there may be reasons that they do not want to be out in the open like that, even just in an academic sense. So you have to give them an opt-out as well, which again is part of open. There should be a way for students to say, I'm not comfortable blogging, what can I do instead? So you know, you work around it through open discussion with your students and say, hey, do you want to do this and be out there, or do you want to do it in such a way that the course is open but you're not exposed?
It's all about choice.
Yeah, I agree. One of the phrases that Jenny uses often that is one of my favorite phrases is that open is an invitation. And I think, as Laura said, it is about choice. And Jess, one of our fellows, just as an example, she has an assignment that her students work on, and they've been given the option, if they'd like, to have their assignment posted to the student patch book, which is, there's a faculty patch book, a student patch book, it's out there, and so they understand the benefits, and they're given a full understanding of why they might want to contribute, but they're given the option not to as well. And I think if you're building in all of the considerations and helping them to think critically about the choices they're making, then there are benefits all around. So,
all right, I think probably our time is up. So I just want to say thank you all for inviting us to be part of your session.
Great. Thank you so much for giving us a session to be part of. And it was really terrific stuff. Thank you so much for your time, all of everyone on site and virtually. And this is Virtually Connecting signing off. I'm going to stop the broadcast now.